Picture this. You and me are in a McDonald's. The fries are salty, the burger is barely identifiable as organic matter, and that cheese is shining like plastic. But never mind, you inhale this bounty, and for a moment, you're satisfied. But later, when you get home and you lay down, a slow, malignant, greasy regret seeps in. This is the experience of listening to Ed Sheeran in 2025. Azizam, Sapphire, Old Phone. His songs are quick, and they are everywhere, and they kind of look like something you want. But once one of his songs stops playing and you are sat there in silence, you realize there's nothing left. You've received no substance, no nourishment. Instead, you meet that familiar fast food queasy realization: I've eaten the same tasteless meal again. How did we get here? For years now, Ed Sheeran has been running on autopilot. He found his winning template with Shape of You and Thinking Out Loud, and has spent every album since recycling the same parts, stripping them down until there's barely anything left. Whatever spark he had on the original versions of these songs has calcified into a habit. He is the constructor of a conveyor belt of safe hooks, lazy lyrics, and songs that barely register as anything other than background noise. Even I've sparred with him over this degradation of his integrity. When I panned his song Azizam on TikTok, he popped into my comments to defend it, telling me it wasn't that deep and that I could just listen to something else. On its face, this is a polite exchange, but under the surface, it said everything about how little he cares about the art that he's putting out. This is the story of how one of the world's biggest songwriters chose efficiency over artistry and became a one-man algorithm designed to go out of style. By doing this, he has quietly strangled the part of his career that once showed promise, and I want to document that slow death before he terrorizes us with Play, yet another collection of songs that will no doubt leave you wondering if music is even something you like anymore. Welcome to How to Murder Your Career, Ed Sheeran. Let me give you something way less depressing to look forward to. If Ed's music has you questioning if you even like music anymore, I promise I'm over on Patreon reminding you why you do. Do you want more Swiftologist, more reactions, live streams, exclusive media reviews? Because I just launched a brand new Swiftologist tier on my Patreon, and it's only $6. If you love my videos but you're not into the podcast side of things, Evolution of a Snake, this is literally perfect for you. It's just my pop culture chaos, unfiltered, unedited, and there's so much that you haven't seen. We're talking unedited and unfiltered reactions to everything Taylor Swift, from Midnights to the Taylor's version, Torture Poets, and whatever is going to come next in September. You will also get unedited versions of all the reaction videos that you see on this main channel. Recent ones include Justin Bieber, Addison Rae, and Lorde. Most excitingly, you'll enjoy exclusive reactions that will never make it to the YouTube channel. Recent uploads include Marina's new album, Miley Cyrus's album, Kesha's album, and a weekly New Music Friday reaction only for my patrons. What's coming up soon? I'm going to be reacting to Renee Rapp, Conan Gray, and Jade, only behind the paywall. And when you join, you unlock my entire archive as well, over 50 hours of Twitch streams, deep diving into the catalogs of Demi Lovato, Ariana Grande, Lana Del Rey, Lady Gaga, Little Mix, plus my reactions to every major award show like the VMAs and the Grammys. And if you are already a snake, I have some very good news for you. The $10 Snakeologist Deluxe tier just had a huge glow up. You get everything I just mentioned in the Swiftologist tier, plus 2 unedited Evolution of Snake episodes every week, audio and video, and exclusive episodes of Madeline's podcast, The Lizard Review. So yeah, there's a lot going on behind the paywall right now. If you've ever thought about supporting the channel, this is the time. The link is in the description. I will see you over there. But anyway, back to Ed Sheeran's Crimes Against Melody. To understand how we got from a scrappy, heartfelt songwriter to a man with a squirrel controlling an iPad in his brain, churning out ringtones on GarageBand, we have to go back to where it all started. Ed Sheeran grew up in a creative family in Suffolk. His parents worked in the arts and his brother was a composer. He was very musical from a young age, singing at his local church and learning guitar at age 11. One of his earliest influences, and I think this is an important one to note when we're discussing the continuous decay of his artistry, was Damien Rice, a kind of vagabond singer-songwriter who was in a successful rock band called Juniper, but quit after creative disagreements and dropped off the grid, essentially. He eventually returned to music as a busker, and he traveled throughout Europe playing songs. This is not someone who is chasing a record deal or a tour or a #1 hit. It seems as though Damien Rice is the kind of artist who is in it for the love of the craft, not the love of the game. This is quite literally the opposite of what Ed Sheeran would go on to become, but I think that this vagabond DIY spirit is what became part of his unique selling point when his best record and also his debut record Plus came out and made a huge impact. It's also kind of what got him signed. As a teen, he self-released a bunch of indie projects, but when he was 16, he dropped out of school to go and make it big in London. He played in tiny venues, bussed a lot, and handed out demo CDs to basically anyone who would take one. By his account, he often slept rough due to a lack of funds. This is like the definition of starving artist. When you think of young, clueless kids pursuing their big, unlikely dreams, it's Ed Sheeran's original story that you think of. He described his lifestyle at the time as gigs, attention, and somewhere to spend the night. What I find interesting here is attention being high on his list of priorities. It's kind of at odds with the music that he was inspired by when he started to learn how to play the guitar. Damien Rice wasn't his only influence. There were other clues about the chart monster he would eventually become, evident in his diverse listening taste. The early music that he made between 2004 and 2007 was standard singer-songwriter fare, folk pop, mild-mannered balladry with raw guitar-driven songs that were recorded as though you were just hearing them at an open mic night. It was low budget, it was DIY. It's not particularly interesting material, but you can definitely hear the Damien Rice flavor throughout. Other artists that he was inspired by at the time were Paul Simon, Bob Dylan, Joni Mitchell. Young boy picks up a guitar and wants to write songs. Of course, this is what he's listening to. But where it started to get interesting for Ed Sheeran and where he found the sweet spot between his talent for playing guitar and performing it live and crooning balladry was through his love for hip hop and loud music. He also grew up idolizing Eminem and Linkin Park, decidedly more upbeat artists with far more bite than the surf jam tunes that drew him to wanting to play the guitar initially. He also admired the sticky hooks of the Beatles. Now that is an important detail for later on. Live performance became incredibly important to Ed as his craft developed. He would rarely perform a song the same way twice, and he would often improvise lyrics on the spot. He also crucially introduced the loop pedal into his performance. If you've ever seen a video of Ed Sheeran playing live, you will be familiar with this contraption. It's a device that records and instantly plays back audio in real time. It was fairly novel when he started incorporating it into his live shows. He could record rhythmic guitar lines and percussion, sometimes just by tapping the body of his guitar. As each loop played back, he built up a complete multi-layered arrangement in real time. This is really cool to watch live and helped make his small, low-budget performances seem larger than life with no AV effects or backing musicians whatsoever. Now, this was a very, very cool thing to do in the late 2000s indie pop DIY scene. Loop pedals were used, but not widely in pop music, which is something he quickly realized and would capitalize on immediately. If you think about it, it was kind of a cheat code to going pop. He could perform songs with obvious pop hooks and melodies at a DIY show and still skate by the qualifying factors by virtue of his performance being so unique and literally done by himself. I want to dig into the UK scene at this time a little bit to help explain why Ed Sheeran was able to reach such success so quickly. The UK indie pop scene was experiencing a paradigm shift in the late 2000s, opening itself with genre blending and a vibrant landscape of eclectic, multi-talented artists. The rigid boundaries of genre itself were melting away, and pop music was being intertwined with indie rock, hip hop, soul, ska, folk, and electronic sounds. Some of the best examples of this shift are the ultimate divas, Lily Allen and Amy Winehouse. Lily Allen debuted in 2006, right before Ed Sheeran moved to London, and blew up in a similar DIY sort of fashion. Only instead of busking in live performances, she used social media, MySpace in particular, to generate buzz. Her debut record, All Right Still, is an excellent snapshot of the scene at this time. Witty, observational lyrics with ska, reggae, pop, and jazz soundscapes. Then, of course, we have the incomparable Amy Winehouse. Back to Black, which also came out in 2006, had a seismic impact on the scene. Her breakthrough heralded a revival of retro soul, jazz, and R&B in mainstream British pop. There was also Florence and the Machine, Mumford & Sons, and the XX, who pushed genre boundaries in their own way. Mumford fused folk and indie rock into massive chart hits, the XX combined minimalism with a distinct electronic texture, and Florence brought the massive orchestral operatic pop. Peripherally, there was also a lot of experimentation going on within indie rock itself, with artists like Alt J, Bastille, and Wolf Alice rising to prominence. UK garage and grime was also enjoying a moment in the sun, influencing so much of the pop mainstream, notably even with indie heroes like Arctic Monkeys and Foals. Two of the main artists that really brought this shift, however, were Wiley and Example, and they were early collaborators of Ed Sheeran's as well. But even though pop was expanding and opening up, there was still the stench of rockism in the air. Serious artists looked down upon pop stars and pop music, generally looking down on women, deeming it as corporate, soulless, and unworthy of its categorization as art. There was real music, and then there was pop music. So given the scene that Ed Sheeran finds himself in, he resisted the label of pop for quite a long time. In fact, it was crucial to his initial success that he rejected the label entirely. This is best demonstrated on the song that really broke him, You Need Me, I Don't Need You. It's so ironic to revisit this song now, given what we know. In You Need Me, Ed's basically airing out his street cred. Look at me, I'm so authentic, I'm not like all those Nepo babies, I'm a real artist and a real writer. The song actually started to blow up because of a filmed performance of it, and it hit all the right levers at the right time. It was genre blending for sure. He's spitting lyrics like Nicki Minaj over that acoustic guitar, and he's asserting his indie credibility while doing it. The whole You Need Me, I Don't Need You is a kiss off to the major labels. This is him saying, I'm scrappy and talented and hardworking enough to pop off without your assistance. And by the way, all your artists are terrible, and I would never be like them. Oh, The irony. Let's dig into some of these lyrics, shall we? See, I'm real. I do it all. It's all me. I'm not fake. Don't ever call me lazy. I sing and write my own tunes. Don't need another wordsmith to make my tunes sell. Call yourself a singer-writer. You're just bluffing. Names on the credits and you didn't write nothing. I will blast and I didn't go to the Brit school. I won't be a product of my genre. My mind will always be stronger than my songs are. So in this passage, he's taking shots at the professional up-and-comers in his genre. For the record, Adele and Amy Winehouse went to the Brit school he speaks of. So that's an interesting comment to make. I think what he's trying to say here is that I have no special treatment. It's literally just me, no connections, and my guitar. And at this moment in time, that was true. He continues spitting, I won't stop till my name's in lights at Stadium Heights with Damien Rice. Watch how I step on the track without a loop pedal. People think I'm bound to blow up. I've done around 1,000 shows, but I haven't got a house. Plus I live on a couch. So you believe the lyrics when I'm singing them out. Well, he's literally just saying the quiet part loud here. I'm not a millionaire. I'm just a cool guy from a boring place trying to live my dream, and I need you to help me do it. Can't you see we're one and the same? He reiterates this in the most iconic verse of the song and maybe his best bar in his career. I'm still the same as a year ago, but more people hear me though, according to the MySpace and the YouTube videos. I'm always doing shows if I'm not in the studio. Truly broke, melody music maker, reading all the papers. They say I'm up and coming like I'm in an elevator. Ed Sheeran lost all his swag after he spat that bar. I don't know why or how, but it literally never returned. Either way, this song really pushed him into the mainstream. He performed it on SBTV, an online music channel that was extremely influential in the UK urban and indie scene. Of course, it was the loop pedal performance that drove interest. Soon after, he was invited by the UK grime rapper Example to support him on tour. In 2010, he released Loose Change, an independent EP, which was very well received, that featured two important songs that we would circle back to on his debut record, The A-Team and Lego House. It's a really interesting vibe that he's curating at this moment. He's saying up and coming like I'm in an elevator while also crooning about how it's too cold outside for angels to fly. This dichotomy is kind of interesting. His ability also to dip in and out of genres must be acknowledged here as a very specific white male privilege. He was allowed to occupy both spaces with the credibility that artists of color don't typically get. Sensitive indie singer-songwriter is usually code for white guy with a guitar. So as this momentum is building, he releases the No. 5 Collaborations project in January of 2011, featuring iconic grime artists like Wiley and Devlin, which soared to No. 2 on the UK iTunes chart with 7,000 copies sold in its first week, completely independent with no label backing. This was really impressive and is totally indicative of how the scene was evolving, but also how important social media had become as a marketing strategy. Really an impressive feat for an entirely self-produced, funded, and released effort. You can see here that Ed's career was kind of tipping into a direction that it didn't ultimately take. The cool guy auteur, what Mark Ronson actually is. A man of taste who brought the right people together to make cool music. Ed had a shot of being that guy with one foot in the mainstream and one foot out, but he went on to completely bastardize the spirit of this project with the follow-up No. 6 Collaborations project in 2019, but I'll cook on that later. Ed Sheeran is basically the lol cow of music criticism these days. He's easy to dunk on because of how terrible he's become, but there was a time when the critical community loved him, and I think that's partly why his reviews are so brutal now. We were conned. No. 5 was received as a brave, innovative fusion of singer-songwriter pop and the UK grime scene, with critics highlighting the authentic lyricism, emotive storytelling, and the unlikely collaborations. There's a rework of the A-Team on here called Little Lady that was particularly well received. He has a lot of goodwill behind him now and momentum with the public. The A-Team had been quietly bubbling with a music video on YouTube, and it resonated strongly with audience when he performed it live, gathering momentum in a kind of snowball effect. Major labels finally clocked onto his potential, and he was signed to Asylum Records shortly after the EP came out. By April of 2011, Ed performed the A-Team on national television for the very first time, Jules Holland, and when it was officially released in June, it debuted at No. 3 on the UK singles chart and became one of the year's best-selling debut singles. His eventual debut album, Plus, came out in September of 2011. He was able to create it so quickly after being signed because he had been working on and refining this material for years at this point. Most of what comprises Plus's material he has tweaked and fine-tuned based on the audience's response while gigging around the country for years. The final sound of the record itself is very polished, much more so than any of his independent releases, thanks to production work from Jay Gosling. Label budget allowed him to ornament many of his songs with things like strings and backing vocals and a full band. Now, are we losing the quintessential Ed Sheeran thing by overproducing him? Well, yes, but it doesn't completely tank the album. How was his record received critically? Medium well, I'd say. The most complimentary reviews cited his ear for melodic songwriting and his nimble hip-hop delivery, as well as his refusal to conform to traditional pop. Are you starting to see the problem later on here? When you build your entire persona as the antithesis of the machine, you cannot simply become the machine and expect everyone to act dumb. It wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, though. More music-forward publications like NME questioned the cohesion of his folk rap blend and, in turn, his authenticity. His writing also received the criticism that I still hear in every review written about him to this day. It is formulaic. It is overly earnest, especially in the slower moments. Ed Sheeran is capable of writing non-sentimental, emotive lyrics, but he refuses to do so in 2025. Let's do a creative writing 101 class because I think this is really important when we're charting how Ed Sheeran murdered his career. Sentimentality in writing should be avoided because it relies on cliche and superficial emotional appeals that undermine the power of the written word. Does this mean that songs can't be emotional or make you feel things? Well, no. The best songs don't need to rely on sentimentality, which is cliche, genericism, obvious emotion, to prompt a strong feeling. Sentimentality is, in my opinion, insincere because it is lazy. How do we clock it? This lyric from one of his worst and most sentimental songs, Old Phone, exemplifies it. I found your number in my old phone. It makes me wish I'd never thrown away those memories. These lyrics lean on nostalgia as a crutch. The image of an old phone easily conjures a lost past, longing, and regrets. This is a direct appeal to a shared experience that we've all had, owning an old phone. And yet, the song does not for a single moment delve into the deeper context or unique detail of what was on his phone or what that phone or those things mean to Ed Sheeran for even the briefest second. This is emotionally manipulative. It's not personal, it's not profound, it's lazy, and it's cheap, and very rich coming from the guy who said he would never be any of those things. Here's an effective, non-sentimental, emotive lyric from Ed Sheeran's first album. On the A-Team, they scream, "The worst things in life come free to us." This is restraint and specificity. He's not instructing us, the listener, to feel a certain way. He gives a sobering, vivid observation about hardship and strife conjured from the narrative that he's telling about a young woman living on the margins of society. He's allowing the emotion to come from the detail and the story rather than from the overly sentimental expression. You look perfect tonight. We keep this love in a photograph. Boring. Anywho, sorry for that digression. I just felt it was important to point out here before I really start going in on the writing later on that we have a foundational understanding of what the issue is. The Record Plus actually had some good tunes. Songs like Drunk and Give Me Love are more sprawling concoctions that embody the early spirit of his DIY days. He's still very much doing his white boy rap thing here, but when it came to the commercial success of this record, the mainstream wasn't exactly resonating with that part of his artistry. The A-Team and You Need Me both preceded the release of the album, peaking at number 3 and number 4 respectively. 2 top 10s from an Unknown's debut prior to album release? Not too shabby. The first single post-album release was a very important one for Ed Sheeran, Lego House. Lego House is a warm acoustic ballad, rather soppy, but it does have a very catchy chorus. This one was very important because it was the first song that an American singer ever heard by Mr. Sheeran. Taylor Swift, heard of her? Plus produced 3 more top 30 singles in the UK with Small Bump, Give Me Love, and Drunk. The album had a long tail of success, with Give Me Love charting in the top 20 more than a year after the album came out, thanks to waves of hype reintroducing him to different markets. It was an instant success in the US, debuting at number 5 on the Billboard 200, very respectable for a British artist. The A-Team was a hit in the US, and it cracked the top 20 at number 16, and Lego House charted in the top 50. No other songs managed to chart in the US, but this was still a very respectable debut charting placement for a British artist. It can take years for Brits to figure out how to crack the US, and some of them never do. So who was listening to Ed Sheeran in 2011, 2012? Well, 15-year-old me. First of all, I was a Tumblr citizen, so I was absolutely indoctrinated to the Ed Sheeran craze. What I noticed firsthand is how organic his rise was. On Tumblr, you used to be able to reblog songs, and the copyright detections were not very robust, so it was kind of rife with leaks and demos and unreleased material circling around. That's where I heard a very early version of the A-Team. Tumblr was super hospitable to the DIY thing because that's what thrived on the platform. When you think of iconic Tumblr things like Electra Heart or Rookie Mag, a lot of that culture around the music or the product was started and generated and perpetuated by fan blogs. So Ed Sheeran's audience was most certainly online young teenagers, specifically young girls. Don't forget, parasocialism and fan behaviors were rapidly advancing with the advent of social media. Fangirls could be obsessive in ways previously unknown to man, and there was also kind of a Brit pop renaissance going on. One Direction hitting it big, Adele cracking the States, Ed was in the right place at the right time. So fangirls is who was really interested in him once the album actually came out. Ed was also an easy sell for parents, a kindly bumbling man, not too attractive, a bashful redhead with a good guitar. Prior to the album's release, however, he had a more diverse audience. University kids and indie listeners in general would have been very much seated for the collaborations record, and many of them were very alienated by the fervor of the teenage girl infatuation that landed when his debut album came out. Indie acts losing their core fan base because they sold out is a tale as old as time. And sell out he did. 2012 was a blockbuster year for Mr. Ed Sheeran. He won 2 Brit Awards for Breakthrough Artist and Best Male Solo Act, and he was the most nominated artist point blank period that year. His string of hit singles were peppered throughout the year, making him feel relevant for a long period of time, with the A-Team breaking America so well that it earned him a Grammy nomination for Song of the Year. Due to his rigorous touring history, he was no stranger to getting off his and working to promote his record. He performed at the Queen's Diamond Jubilee and at the 2012 Olympics closing ceremony. From the very beginning, cracking America was very serious business to Ed. He toured the States with Snow Patrol as their opening act, and by the end of the year, he was headlining shows in 6 to 9K seater venues. He further expanded his songwriting empire by penning 2 songs for another UK cultural export and juggernaut, One Direction, landing a massive hit with Little Things. This is like breakneck pace for a new artist. It also helps that he had all this live performance experience and a good record to sell, but in terms of breaking America, he had one very special and one very famous friend to thank. You might be familiar with her, as I said, Taylor Swift. Taylor started manifesting their friendship by writing the lyrics to Lego House on her arm at the Speak Now tour. That is a low-key Taylor lore. If things go right, we can frame it, put it on a wall. We'll get to that another time. Ed's people reached out to Taylor's people to set up a meeting between the two of them, and they met in Nashville and immediately hit it off. Conveniently, this is when Taylor was in the thick of writing Red. They recorded 2 songs together for her album, Everything Has Changed and Run. Everything Has Changed was included on the standard edition of Red, which came out in October of 2012 and was released as a single the following year. To say their fan bases were excited for this collaboration is an overstatement. Taylor really hadn't collaborated with that many artists at this time, and this felt like a huge win for the internet. It was something the Tumblr girls could only have dreamed of, but it came true. Taylor then invites Ed to join her on the North American leg of the Red tour, bringing him out in the middle of her own show every night to perform Everything Has Changed as a duet. The impact of sharing her spotlight at this pivotal point in her career is difficult to overstate. This era was one of the most high-profile pop events of the 2010s, and it was a truly international effort. Taylor was going global and promoting this across the 7 seas, which means that Ed got promoted and mentioned in radio interviews by Taylor Swift in Sweden, in France, in Australia, Tokyo, Berlin. The list goes on and on. He was definitely inspired by Taylor's approach to fan service too. He met fans constantly before and after the shows, took pictures with them, signed autographs, generally thanking people for their time and attention. This would not be the first time that Ed Sheeran jacked part of Taylor Swift's career. We will get to that later. By the end of 2013, he transformed from Taylor Swift's opening act to booking headlining shows in those very same arenas. No one has ever benefited from Tay nepotism more than Ed Sheeran. He also had the cosign from the world's other biggest phenomenon, One Direction. You literally couldn't dream of a better debut. He really went from nobody to household name in about 18 months, and it wasn't just due to Taylor Swift. He came out with the right product at the right time, and honestly, though he was absolutely abandoning what made him good to tastemakers in the music industry by honing in on his corniness, it was a terrific business decision. If you're gonna sell your soul, get a good price. Let's talk about Ed Sheeran's Imperial era. After a whirlwind 2013, Ed Sheeran was on top of the world, nominated for multiple Grammys, headlining Madison Square Garden, touring with Taylor Swift, and this was all with an album of songs he'd composed many, many years before they finally popped off. It was his Pink Pony Club moment. So what's next? Well, a sophomore record, but of course, for many artists with an explosive debut, coming up with subsequent material can be a daunting challenge. But that has never been a case for Ed Sheeran. He is a prolific producer of music, just by volume, not quality. He can bang out 3, 4, 5 songs in a day and finish one song in a few hours. This speaks to 2 essential parts of his artistry, which is what's on trial in today's video. He prioritizes efficiency over depth and novelty over quality. Being that generative as a songwriter is a blessing and a curse. It is the main problem with the Tortured Poets department. Taylor Swift, who is a far more competent songwriter than Ed Sheeran from a lyrical perspective, who cares about the stories being told on her songs, found quality variation in this level of output. Ed Sheeran is far less attached to his subject material. He is more focused on the outcome, and after a taste of explosive commercial success, he clearly just wanted more. Billboard described him during this period of time as a hungry artist doing everything possible to elevate to another level. Most of the reviews of his work also focus on his significant output. He wrote over 120 songs for his sophomore record, which begs the question, is more synonymous with good? Let's stew on that for a while we discuss Ed Sheeran's sophomore album, Multiply. When the lead single came out, he was in the lucky position of being the artist everybody wanted more from. This meant that whatever came out was going to be well received, or at least enthusiastically received. Sing was the lead single from Multiply, co-written with and produced by Pharrell. This is a very bad song. I'm of the opinion that Multiply is one of Ed's better albums, but this particular excerpt from it is humiliatingly cringe. It was very clear that Ed wanted to lean into that bad boy version of himself. I can only describe Ed Sheeran the bad boy as a toddler wearing his father's tuxedo. The suit doesn't fit and you look really small in it. The swagger of You Need Me had been effectively curtailed by his "all shucks, Mr. Nice Guy" sensitive shtick that carried Plus effectively into the mainstream. The indie scene might have been checking for bad boy Ed, but the general public, not so much. The lyrics of this song are nonsense. The chorus is literally, "Sing, oh, louder." This is the first instance of the Ed Sheeran formula crime. I'm gonna write a song about being a little drunk and thinking you're really hot and hoping you'll let me hit it. This is the formula followed by Sing, Shape of You, Azizam, Bad Habits, Shivers, the list goes on and on, and as you can see, it was tired the first time. This song was, of course, a success because it came from him at this moment. It hit #1 in the UK, his first UK #1, and number 13 in the States. But the label knew it was a flop from the moment that it came out thematically. It was straying too far from the brand. And so a month after its release, a promotional single was issued to calm the masses, the opening track of Multiply called One. Of all his soppy ballads, this one is quite charming. Actually, there's nothing groundbreaking going on, but the chorus has a nice melody and a familiar visual. All my senses come to life while I'm stumbling home as drunk as I have ever been, and I'll never leave again because you are the only one. This is his other formula, a song designed to make you say, oh, like you're watching a dog with 3 legs run for the first time. The album comes out in mid-June, and there is more interesting fare than One and Sing on it, thank God. Where Sing kind of fumbled the bad boy swagger and shtick, he regained his sea legs on Don't, which I think is second to You Need Me as his best rap song. This is allegedly about Ellie Goulding, and an interesting tidbit of celebrity gossip has never hurt a pop song. Don't is well written because it zeroes in on a specific encounter with a specific person. He's relaying the moment his situationship reveals she's been sleeping with his friend and comes to his hotel room to beg for forgiveness. It has a good melody and a clear story. Congratulations, Ed Sheeran. Don't is the official second single for Multiply, and it gets a significant radio push. It also comes with a flop music video of like a breakdancer. And here's where I need to call out Ed Sheeran's significant weakness as a pop boy. He's not hot. I'm sorry. I know it sounds brutal to say, but part of being a real pop sensation is, at the very least, being interesting to look at. You don't have to be Harry Styles, but having a little swag goes a long way. For most of this part of Ed Sheeran's career, he still looks like the unemployed teen drinking too many beers and crashing on his friend's couch. No one's saying you have to get in the gym and wear Dior, but diva, we could put on a button down or get a tailored, well-fitted, oversized tee, some relaxed jeans. Instead, he's wearing 3/4 length cargo pants with a million pockets on stage. Not good. Pop music relies heavily not just on hits, but aesthetics. Creating a world out of your music means you have to at least try to be visually inclined. And Ed Sheeran has some of the worst, most terrible aesthetic sensibilities. It really is the most cringe thing about him. Have you ever seen his album covers? The Play cover that's about to come out, that looks like a Microsoft Paint job. Lana has made better covers with her PixArt app. Of course, he's everywhere promoting this record. BBC Live Lounge, radio interviews, SNL, Ellen, Letterman, Graham Norton, the VMAs, the Grammys, up, down, sideways, left, right, today, tomorrow, next week, next millennia. But with all of this press, where are the iconic Ed Sheeran moments? Where's his paparazzi at the VMAs? He is quite literally incapable of being an icon. And this is a big part of the problem when his songwriting goes to what the hell are we paying attention for? Regardless of that, Multiply is a great success. It debuts at #1 in the UK and the US. It sells millions of copies and logs many weeks at #1, noticeably less successful in the US, but still a great achievement for a British artist. The breakthrough moment here, though, did not come from his weird white boy swag. No, it came from a soppy, twee love song. Thinking out loud, heard of it? This is the kind of song that middling white boys, the Benson Boones and the Alex Warrens of this world dream of. It makes the kind of money that you can retire on. Does anyone else wish Ed Sheeran retired after this? Me, I do. He almost made a moment happen here with the music video, which he actually deigns to star in, learning how to ballroom dance. This is definitely one of his signature hits, and it is a go-to wedding dance floor song. That's where Ed Sheeran really excels. You're 4 glasses of wine in at your cousin's wedding. The vibe in the room is really weird because of all the intergenerational mingling, but you can all band together and half-heartedly murmur the words to Thinking Out Loud. Someone's gotta do it. Someone has to unite the mid people with a mid song. This was a smash hit, obviously, peaking at #2 in the US and #1 in the UK. Photograph was also a sleeper hit from this record, and that song is just quite literally thinking out loud in a different font. It truly amazes me how he just does the same thing over and over and over again. White male mediocrity is unbelievable. You know what? I do think there is more interesting content on Multiply, though. Of all his soppy ballads here, Tenerife Sea is my favorite. It's the most sparse lyrically and the least sentimental. Everyone on Tumblr also thought it was about Taylor, so, I have an attachment to it because of that. When you listen to that song, it doesn't feel like you're the crowd in a television show taping and Ed Sheeran is holding up a big sign saying, "Cry!" instead of laugh while he performs the song to you. The best song on this record, by far, and maybe one of the best in his catalog, is called Bloodstream. I genuinely still love this song. It's the most Plus-esque song on the record, a classic loop pedal moment. It's about taking MDMA during his friend's wedding, waiting to feel the chemicals kick in, and all the heightened emotion that comes with that. Love, warmth, fear, dissociation. It also has some pretty visual lyrics. Colored crimson in my eyes, 1 or 2 could free my mind. This is a cool song, not the jacked up swagger of Sing. To me, this is Ed Sheeran's creative peak. So the plebeians love this record. What do the critics think? It's again, like Plus, medium well received. Most note how ambitious he seems to be as a songwriter, and they remark on how his folk acoustic hip-hop experiment still seems to be developing at a promising rate. Honestly, at this moment in time, I would have agreed. As much twee and cringe as there was on this record, I still think it felt like an artistic project. Was it a statement? Well, no. But it felt like there was some humanity in it. It didn't feel focus grouped to death or invented by a man with a squirrel controlling an iPad in his brain. But spoiler, this doesn't last. He's going from strength to strength in 2014. He was Spotify's most streamed artist, and Multiply was the most streamed album of the year. He wins Best Male Solo Artist and Album of the Year at the Brits. He launches a sold-out world tour, playing in mostly arenas with 3 sold-out shows in Wembley Stadium. It is deeply insane to go from playing in dive bars to stadiums in a 3-year span. Kudos to Ed Sheeran. I happened to attend this tour in Singapore, and I thought it was really a very good show. He is a good performer and a very talented singer and guitar player, so his shows are generally enjoyable. I saw him in a very small theater, though, so I don't really know how that translates to stadiums, but he's been doing that very successfully, so I guess he's good there too. The Multiply tour goes on for over a year and grosses around $150 million. Not bad for a 5 with some talent. He scores another hit with Justin Bieber's Love Yourself in 2015. I'm sure his royalty checks as a songwriter outside of his solo work would alone feed many families. He also performs at Global Citizen, which I attended in New York City in 2015, and historically performs with Beyonce, who does charity work by letting him up on that stage. They do Drunk in Love together, and to be fair, that is kind of iconic. He is nominated for Album of the Year, Best Pop Vocal, and Best Song for Visual Media at the 2015 Grammys, but loses on all accounts. Oh no. Even though it was released in 2014, Multiply is the second best-selling album worldwide behind Adele's 25. To give you context, it was more successful than Taylor Swift's 1989. By a slim margin, they might even be tied. Justin Bieber's Purpose and One Direction's Made in the AM. Again, not bad for a 5 with some talent. In early 2016, he finally won 2 Grammys. Song of the Year and Best Pop Solo Performance for Thinking Out Loud. Taylor Swift is very excited to lose to her best friend. Then he announces he'll be stepping back from touring and social media to see everything he missed over his years of nonstop performing. He clarified that though he was off the grid, he would still be working on his album, which fans could expect to hear more about by the end of the year. We were so free then, so happy, and Ed Sheeran lists in 2016, Trump presidency caused by the release of Shape of You? Many people are saying this. Something happened to Ed Sheeran's brain during this time away. One would think that he'd reconnect with his songwriting roots, kick around Suffolk or the grimy parts of London he frequented as a scrappy, ambitious teen, but no. Something darker was brewing. He was plotting a terrorist attack on this world. The release of music so infectious and mind-numbing, it can only be described as a crime against humanity. Okay, I'm obviously being facetious here, but I'm being serious about the fact that this was a real turning point for the downgrade in quality of his musical output. And here's why I am so hard on Ed Sheeran and so emphatic about his work being meaningless. He himself doesn't view what he does as an artistic endeavor. His entire career is a power play to be the best. It is competitiveness disguised as achievement. Here's what he told GQ in 2017 when he was promoting Divide, the album he wrote after his year off. He watches the charts like a hawk, and the first thing he does in the morning is check his sales figures and set numerical goals for each of his albums. The way he creates is so detached from the emotional production and labor of art that you can't even call it formulaic. It's algorithmic. He wants to stream the most and sell the most. That is his #1 priority. A lot of people try to argue that Taylor Swift does this too, and you're half right. Taylor Swift is focused on success, but the way that she measures the impact of her art begins and ends with the efficacy of the storytelling. Taylor is much more likely to be influenced by a poor critical reception than missing a #1 on a specific single. She is an artist, and the value of her art is not determined by its commercial dominance. Though make no mistake, she wants that commercial dominance, but she'd have nothing to sell if her heart wasn't in it. His heart aside, Ed Sheeran always has something to sell you, some godforsaken variation of the stuff you've heard before. He calibrates his work to the lowest common denominator in the room. Other artists have noted this about him, usually in an admiring way. Taylor once said he was obsessed with charts. So I have 2 pieces of evidence that Ed Sheeran is not an artist. He creates at a fast pace that indicates skill and proficiency, but not talent. And he wakes up every morning and checks his streaming numbers to assess what the next numerical goal should be for his upcoming product. From this point on, we should really stop calling Ed Sheeran's records albums and just refer to them as products. Because what you expect from an album, a thesis, a mission, a purpose, a perspective, a point of view, you will not find on any of Ed Sheeran's subsequent works. His entire approach to creation is not dissimilar to the delusional founders and entrepreneurs of the Silicon Valley Boys. Move fast and break things. Create prolifically at such a high frequency of output that you will eventually find your minimum viable product. Ed Sheeran writes like he's beta testing a product, not making music. Every track is stripped down to whatever chorus or hook will survive the gauntlet of playlists and TikTok clips, and then he rolls it out with military precision. Forget expression and craft. His process centers around efficiency. You can hear it. These songs sound pre-chewed. They're smoothed over until there's nothing left to hold on to. That's why they feel empty, like something spat out by a robot. They do the job, they get the streams, and they say absolutely nothing while doing it. What makes Ed Sheeran's approach to songwriting so rotten is that it guts the very thing that songwriting is supposed to be about. Songs are supposed to bleed a little bit. They're supposed to carry the mess of whatever thought or feeling has dragged them into existence. Ed Sheeran's songs don't bleed. He builds them in a lab to be as safe and frictionless as possible. His obsession with chart dominance turns the act of writing into a math problem, and the music suffers because of it. When you compare that to Taylor Swift, who is just as prolific, maybe even more so in terms of production, she writes to exercise something. Even on her most sprawling and chaotic record, The Torture Poets Department, there's no obvious Shape of You style hit because she wasn't aiming for one. She was busy pouring herself and her story into the work. One path drains songs of their life, the other one gives them their pulse. Ed Sheeran's reckless assembly line approach to songwriting doesn't just water down his music, it keeps landing him in court. When you're cranking out 4 or 5 songs a day, you're not stopping to ask where that melody came from or whether it already belongs to someone else. This was the heart of the Thinking Out Loud trial. His song folded so easily into Marvin Gaye's Let's Get It On that a jury had to decide if he'd lifted it even unintentionally. The musicologist on this case calls that cryptomnesia, where a forgotten tune resurfaces as if it is your own. George Harrison lost a lawsuit over this with My Sweet Lord, and Paul McCartney famously apparently used to ask people he knew if they'd heard the melody to his hit Yesterday before daring to release it. Ed Sheeran doesn't really bother with that kind of caution because he doesn't really think that deeply about his music. The trial, though, wasn't just about him. If Ed Sheeran had lost, it would have sent shockwaves through the industry. Pop has always been regenerative. It thrives on shared chords, grooves, and feelings that sound both old and new. A guilty verdict could have turned every songwriter's life into a legal minefield where the most basic musical DNA was suddenly up for grabs. And that context does matter. His win protected a tradition of borrowing that's essential to the genre. But none of that changes how sloppy he is. On the stand in court, he made it clear that he writes constantly, doesn't read music, and knows that most pop songs just kind of slide into each other. That looseness might be harmless in other people's hands, but for him, it's a liability. It's why he settled another copyright case against the song Photograph for millions and had to add writing credits to Shape of You for borrowing from TLC. And it's why he still finds himself fighting lawsuits. The industry may have dodged a bullet with his acquittal in that specific trial, but the fact that these cases keep circling him says it all. This redhead ain't cursed, he's careless. All right, now let's talk about the monster divide. Ed spends his time away in 2016 traveling and, in his words, not seeing the world through a screen. To me, that would indicate a return to the music he made at the beginning of his career. But oh boy, was I wrong. He uploads a blue square to his social media at the very end of the year. In January 2017, the world was introduced to a plague it has not yet recovered from, Shape of You. He again, like Multiply, releases an old Ed song with a bad boy Ed song. So Castle on the Hill is released in tandem with Shape of You. In my opinion, Castle on the Hill is a really good Ed Sheeran song. It has some specific images conjured in the songwriting, him running away from his brother and breaking his leg, tasting the mountain grass as he falls, linking us back to his desire to reunite with the familiar feeling of being home after being on tour for so long. It's a nostalgic song that hits because it includes details from his life that are universally applicable. Note how it's the detail that makes it universally relatable, not the experience itself. Singing about missing the past does not always make a good song. Listen to his latest dud, Old Phone, for an example of how it can ring hollow. But he accomplishes something here with the storytelling and the melodic songwriting. That chorus is euphoric. It matches the vibe. It also has a good music video for once, as in a music video with an artistic direction. It gives us a snapshot into where he came from and what the period of life that he's yearning for actually looked like. Castle on the Hill is the best case scenario of what Ed Sheeran could accomplish with some time off. Shape of You, not so much. To be clear, Shape of You is a great pop song. It's very catchy, it resonated well, it has a very stupid music video if you're here to investigate that, but the umbrage I take with Shape of You is that this is the blueprint he's been chasing ever since, the minimum viable product of his career. Shape of You is ground zero, where he cracked the code for maximum streams with minimum effort. A mindless hook, generic lyrics, and a beat engineered to lodge itself into your brain whether you want it there or not. And again, that beat, by the way, is jacked from TLC's No Scrubs. It's not even an original concoction. Everything Ed Sheeran has put out ever since has been some variation on this formula. Each attempt is less inspired and more hollow. He may try to recapture those numbers and get close to it, but he never recaptures the spark. We cannot deny the success of this double drop, though. He made history in the UK, with Shape of You topping the charts and Castle on the Hill chasing it at number 2, making him the first artist to ever enter the top 2 at the same time with new releases. They were both chart monsters. Shape of You stayed at number 1 for 13 consecutive weeks, and Castle on the Hill was in the top 10 for 14 weeks. To give you some perspective on just how big Ed Sheeran is in the UK, which is a smaller market than the US to be fair, Shape of You alone got 13.4 million streams in its first week, and both singles combined outsold the rest of the UK top 20 in the same week. The double act smashes in the US too. Ed Sheeran is the first artist to lodge 2 new singles in the top 10, with Shape of You at number 1 and Castle on the Hill at number 6. Shape of You stayed at number 1 for 12 non-consecutive weeks and was undeniably the song of the year, 2017's best performing hit on the Hot 100. Then it's promo time, divas, and he's everything everywhere all at once with these songs. BBC, Radio 1, Z100, Capital FM, The Brits. How are these songs critically received? I'd say the reviews were mixed. Shape of You was clocked by everyone as a hit, which doesn't mean that it's good, it just means that it's undeniably a catchy pop song and easy to enjoy. There were 2 reviews that really killed me though. In a positive review, Jeremy Gordon from Spin said that Shape of You is a plausible attempt at convincing us he has had sex. A lot of it. It kind of slaps, though you can't really picture Ed Sheeran ever saying, "Put that body on me," to a real human woman. Clocked. Again, we return to the central problem for Ed Sheeran making these insipid dance floor sexy confessions. It's not believable coming from you, diva. You can put the Justin Bieber wig on, but you will never be Justin Bieber. We're not getting seduced by Ed Sheeran. In a negative review, Uproxx called it one of the worst songs of the year and expanded on this juxtaposition between the song and the artist by writing, "The contrarian in me is always tempted to defend Ed Sheeran because it's way too easy to take shots at this guy. Then I hear the part in Shape of You where he says, and last night you were in my room and now my bed sheets smell like you. And now I want to push him into a locker." Clocked. Again, it feels fake and insincere because it was created to game the charts, and we can tell. It's like drinking diet soda. You know what it's trying to mimic, but the taste is a little off. The fake sugar coats your teeth and ends up reminding you just how much sweeter the original tastes. Castle on the Hill was much better received. The reviewers were truly starting to clock the Ed Sheeran repetitive formula at this particular juncture. I'd say this is where the Ed Sheeran cringe, Ed Sheeran backlash, Ed Sheeran fatigue really started to set in. Shape of You in particular was everywhere. And we should note that whenever Ed Sheeran drops a song like Shape of You, he engages in the same demented algorithmic playlisting marketing campaign radio blitz that subjects grocery stores around the world to his musical terrorism. That is annoying. People generally don't like being sold to. The trick of pop music is to make people addicted to your song. It's so irresistibly catchy that you end up seeking it on your own. Espresso is a great example of that. While this may have been the case for Shape of You, Ed Sheeran's dogged overexposure tactics have only served to make him even more annoying and robotic with every carbon copy of that song that he releases. So then the album comes out in March and it's a smash. It debuts at #1 and sells almost 700,000 copies in the first week in the UK, achieving 2.1 million in sales by December, the best-selling album of 2017. It broke several UK streaming records at launch, and all 16 album tracks debuted in the top 20 in its release week, a feat unmatched by any artist since. In the US, it debuts with 450,000 copies at #1, and it was also the top-selling album of that year. Apparently, Divide is now the second most streamed album of all time on Spotify as of March 2024. So obviously, this was Ed Sheeran's commercial peak. It was a pretty insane year for him. He headlined Glastonbury, announced another massive world tour, and released 3 more very successful singles: Galway Girl, which hit #2 in the UK, but didn't really chart in the US, Perfect, which was a Christmas #1 in the UK, and significantly insisted on the charts in the US by a remix featuring who else but Beyonce. Perfect is like thinking out loud. It's a song bound for the wedding dance floor, and the final single was Happier, which is one of his most irritating ballads. Ostensibly, the general public, the lowest common denominator, loved Divide. It was so successful, but do streams and sales translate to quality of work? If you're asking me and other critics whose job is assessing the overall artistic impact of a project, in this particular case study, we are saying hell no. The cynicism of Ed Sheeran's entire shtick, "I'm the bumbling outsider guy, I'm just a silly little British redhead, won't you pick me up and put me in your pocket," is directly at odds with this hawkish, maniacal focus that he cops to in interviews but not in the music itself on selling the most records and beating everyone else. John Caramanica for the New York Times described very well why Ed Sheeran is able to get away with the sentimental slop of Thinking Out Loud and Perfect, describing these songs as exceedingly swaggerless. He also says, but since Ed Sheeran has no cool to undermine, he can chase the aesthetic middle with no lasting damage to his reputation. You can't sell out if you don't have a value system or aesthetic credo to protect. If you can believe it, this was one of the more positive reviews. Most of the reviews do celebrate his prowess at dominating the charts, but this review points out the exact reason why Ed Sheeran's music can only be viewed as a product and not art. You can't sell out if you don't have a value system. The Pitchfork review on this record by Laura Snape's Diva, which gives a pathetic 2.8, is one of the best and meanest takedowns I've ever had the pleasure of reading. Let's start with how they ended it, which concurs with the point raised by the New York Times. On Eraser, Ed Sheeran sings, "I'm well aware of certain things that will befall a man like me. He means booze and drugs, but it's his inability to reconcile his early underdog status with his titanic popularity that'll ensnare him. Sheeran wants it both ways, artist and celebrity, nice guy who doesn't want to alienate his fans with political convictions, anti-consumerist while gagging to dominate pop's arms race. He's the guy she told you not to worry about, and he's wearing your clothes. Get him. Get him again for me. This cook is a little too good not to share. Galway Girl is a banger, but it is also objectively a terrible and embarrassing song. And here's what Laura Snapes had to say about that. There is no greater evidence of Sheeran's commercial power than his label acquiescing to keep Core's tribute Galway Girl on this album. It's the latest of many Sheeran barnstormers about meeting a great gal, who is definitely real, on a boozy night out. A check from the Irish Tourist Board for his name-dropping Guinness, Jameson, John Powers, and Van Morrison may be forthcoming, which would certainly cover any forthcoming lawsuit from Bewitched for infringing on their 98 hit C'est La Vie. Sheeran traveled the world for a year before making this record, and considering his cultural takeaway from County Galway, we should be thankful his travels didn't also inspire him to write a song about lassoing une mademoiselle with a string of onions beneath the Eiffel Tower, or how love sprang eternal with a girl in a drindle in Austria. I just burst out laughing. I just burst out laughing. This was really when Ed Sheeran started to become the bad guy Chun-Li to people who actually care about music and who enjoy listening to music, because it is one of the most humanist art forms. His very existence as a creator, note how I'm saying creator and not artist because he makes content and not art, is a betrayal to the essence of the craft that we care about. Now, that's not to say there's anything wrong with tapping your foot to Galway Girl or shaking your hips to Shape of You at a wedding. Ed Sheeran songs are the junk food of pop music. You should consume them sparingly and with your wits about you. And though it may satisfy some very basic urge in you, you should not promote these snacks as healthy or make them your main food group, unless you want to be spiritually unwell. And if you want that, please be my guest. Stream Ed Sheeran only until you die. As I mentioned, later on in 2017, he collaborates with Beyonce, which is insane. She loves to do charity work. And he goes kind of viral for looking like a video gamer while she's slaying the house down boots in a gorgeous dress. This is definitely also the period of time where Ed Sheeran is becoming cringe to the general public. He is certainly being shoved down our throats, and overexposure tends to lead to a backlash of some description. He's also featured on Taylor Swift's iconic album Reputation, and his verse on Endgame is often cited in the reviews of that album as one of the worst parts of it. Throughout 2017, he writes quite a lot of slop for other artists: James Blunt, Zara Larsson, Liam Payne, Strip That Down, which was also mocked and made fun of for being cringe, an Ed Sheeran special, Rita Ora, Tim McGraw randomly, and Jessie Ware. You can tell the tides are turning on him critically too by looking at his Grammy nominations. Shape of You was the biggest song of 2017, but at the 2018 Grammys, he wasn't nominated for Song, Record, or Album of the Year. The Academy says, we can see what you're doing. He did, however, win in more marginal categories like Best Pop Solo Performance and Best Pop Vocal Album. When he's selling like that, you can't just ignore him entirely. This is also the period of time where he starts to get a bit frustrated with the critics. Like any dictator who is used to controlling an industry by the flick of their finger, he does not like to be disliked. He says to Rolling Stone that the function of a music critic is useless in the age of streaming. It's very convenient for someone like Ed Sheeran, who is routinely panned and despised by critics, who can clock his machinations, not for any personal reason, but for the literal fact that he makes bad music on purpose, to suggest there is no value in critique. I have experienced Ed's distaste for criticism myself on my own TikTok. I delivered a pan of Azizam, which I make no apologies for, and he rather defensively engaged in a back and forth with me. He commented, lol. I responded, King, I'm sorry, but we need to come up with something else. And he responded with, mate, all good. I only make music I enjoy making and put it out. It's really not that deep. Plenty of other music to listen to. Have an awesome weekend. Then he suggested I'd like Old Phone, which, spoiler alert, I didn't. Ed Sheeran, tasteless as usual. On its face, this interaction is pleasant and funny. He is responding with good form to what is a negative review. But if you read in between the lines of his longer response, what he's actually saying is a common logical fallacy I receive a lot from stands of artists whose music I review in a not uniformly positive way. My opinion doesn't matter because I could just go and listen to something I like, and I should stop being critical and just enjoy the music. It's a polite way of saying shut up. But music is that deep to me. It's my job, it's my passion, it's why I care enough to even bother with a review. It's extremely concerning to hear an artist openly admitting that their craft is not that deep to them. It also contradicts a lot of what Ed Sheeran said in the past about how much heart and soul should and does apparently, allegedly, go into his music. Interesting how when you become the chart monster, it's not that deep. Because you know what you're doing is bad. I already suspected there wasn't much going on in these songs, but thank you for saying the quiet part out loud. This prickly defensiveness is a bigger and uglier trend in pop culture. It's not that deep is the theme of discourse in 2025. We are discouraged by each other from digging into the media we encounter, wanting more from it, interpreting it critically, and interpreting media critically is received as forced hate. Whatever that means, I've never needed to force my hate for something. It comes straight from my heart. But I digress. As I have said over and over, ad nauseum, this is the death of intellectual curiosity. And thank you, Ed Sheeran, because you're part of it. You know it's bad when even the artists themselves are, one, refusing to engage with critical perspectives on their work, and two, telling other listeners, like Ed Sheeran did in my comment section, that caring too much about music is a waste of time. This is why we get algorithm Spotify slop from people who have the skill set but not the desire to make something better. If we all followed Ed Sheeran's approach to making music and responding to music, then we're not wrestling with, pulling apart, or arguing about what we love. It is reduced to background noise, content to consume, and not art to feel and live with and understand. When the artists themselves are saying it's not that deep, what are we, the listeners and the critics who are under the premise that music matters to the artistic expression of humanity, searching for? If you can believe it, the horrors continue. In 2019, Ed Sheeran announces the No. 6 Collaborations project. I think this might be the last time anyone who cares about music had their ears perk up for an Ed Sheeran release. After the cynicism of his songwriting continued to reveal itself in the release of Divide, this project could have potentially been a nod to his roots. Remember that the No. 5 Collaborations project, released in early 2011, is what led him to getting signed by a major label to begin with. Before we dive into what transpired fired with this miscarriage of justice. Let's revisit what the good parts of the first iteration of this collaboration project look like. Ed Sheeran applied his quirky, specific white boy swag to catchy songs augmented by respected DIY and indie musicians, specifically rappers and UK grime artists. That was the coolest and most avant-garde or innovative Ed Sheeran ever has or will be. After he was lambasted for chasing the aesthetic middle with no value system, perhaps this was his creative rebuttal. Would there be a heart and a soul on this project? He was, after all, invoking its predecessor to drum up interest and credibility. One part of Ed's artistry that managed to escape the firing squad, even in the harshest reviews of Divide, was his willingness to be agile in pop music, to incorporate other sounds, styles, and voices to achieve this aesthetic middle. Theoretically, a collaborative album that did just that could potentially have put him back in good graces with the tastemakers in the music industry. Psych! Wrong! If anything, this was the nail in the coffin. Further proof that the old Ed Sheeran cannot come to the phone right now or ever again. He's blonde and gone, etc., etc. It was a passion project, according to Ed Sheeran. But the passion wasn't about making music and exploring genre diversity like number 5 was. This passion was about working with as many A-listers as possible and mining their unique appeal for a hit he could also sign his name on. In an interview with iHeartRadio, he said, "My approach to making this was like, if I don't do this now, when will I get a chance to work with these people?" So that was the heart of the project, aka the same heart as Divide. Streams, sales, dominance, not art. I think he also probably imagined that some of the cooler aspects of the artists who wound up agreeing to be involved in this would rub off on him, making him less lame and more cool. The result is a playlist of songs that are forgettable at best and offensive at worst. I'll get more into the creative aspect of this project later on, but let's talk about the commercial success of it. He slowly revealed the artists over time to build hype. 6 singles preceded the album. What you'll notice about each of these songs is that they don't sound like a genuine collaboration between these artists. It sounds like whoever he's collaborating with put through the Ed Sheeran filter and presented sadly and without consent from the artist. The lead single is I Don't Care, which is a C-tier Justin Bieber song that hits number 2 on the Hot 100 and topped the UK singles chart. Beautiful People featuring Khalid, one of the most irritating songs ever made, and the pinnacle of what makes Ed Sheeran an insufferable songwriter, hit number 1 in the UK and the US. The aesthetic middle, the lowest common denominator. I need to speak my truth and say that this project is foul. It is the most transparent attempt at relevance, and there is something deeply pathetic about its execution. The worst part of it all is that for a collaborations album, the uniting factor on all of these songs that bear no relationship to each other is Ed Sheeran's saccharine melodies and insipid lyrics. Mark Ronson's Late Night Feelings is a much better encapsulation of what this project could have been. Consequence captured the problem with this record very well in their review. It seems 2019 is the year of the conglomerate record. Say what you want about Ed Sheeran, but the man knows how to write a pop record. It might not be memorable, it sure as hell won't even resemble authentic, but it will be inescapable. He writes the kind of song you have no recollection of ever listening to, and yet somehow the lyrics have permeated your brain. Get him! This is the effect of creating music with the phrase, "It's not that deep," at the forefront of your mind. You have successfully been able to irritate people into consuming your music. This review goes on to cook him in a very extraordinary way. I have to read it to you verbatim. On number 6 collaborations project, Sheeran has the reverse Kanye effect. He has managed to bring out some of the worst in the artists featured on his tracks. Travis Scott's verse is devoid of effort and energy, and it has rookie-level syntax. Chance delivers one of the weakest verses he's written in years, and unless you're paying strict attention, you'll probably miss Young Thug's verse on Feels because it is so lacking in presence. Perhaps it's because Sheeran himself brings very little to the table. There's entirely insufficient intensity for the other artists to feed off of. Oh, and hey, did anyone pick up on the fact that Ed Sheeran is a super chill, super down-to-earth, not at all typical Hollywood kind of guy? If the last 2 albums weren't enough for you to grasp that entirely groundbreaking concept, you're in luck. That's the subject of at least a third of the songs on this record: Beautiful People, Antisocial, and Remember the Name. Ed Sheeran really, really wants you to know that he's absolutely no fun at parties. Oh, and everyone else is vapid and superfluous, except for him, of course. And it doesn't stop there, it keeps going. The rest of the tracks are equally disingenuous, but there are 2 moments that stand out as particularly egregious. First, there is the time that Sheeran sings 3 words in Spanish on the extremely corny south of the border. In addition to its exceedingly tokenizing lyrics, it's also downright confusing because Sheeran is from England, so which border he's referring to is unclear. This can only be compared to the time that the very Canadian Drake rapped about the president of the US to be #relatable. And secondly, there is the relentlessly isolating moment where Sheeran, a multi-millionaire musician, sings about his financial woes. "I'm busy stacking up the paper for the bad times," he says on I Don't Want Your Money. An iconic review, an iconic review. South of the Border with Camila Cabello and Cardi B, in my opinion, is a flop where we really need to spend some time, and I'm going to circle back to actually Pitchfork's review of this album to point out why this song is particularly egregious. They wrote, "In an album defined mostly by banality, South of the Border featuring Camila Cabello and Cardi B is an actual bizarre moment. It's a Latin pop fantasy. Sheeran sings of someone's caramel thighs and curly hair, punctuated by Cardi's suggestion that Ed's got a little jungle fever. Maybe unintentionally, the race play points directly to the elephant in the room. Though he built his fame on confessional, earnest acoustic guitar songs, Ed Sheeran loves black music and he wants you to know it." Clocked. He was completely clocked. All right. All right, back to my words. At this point, Ed Sheeran has been harassing the airwaves for almost 2 straight years. We're begging for reprieve. And thankfully, for the rest of 2019, he mostly focuses on touring, fighting his many lawsuits, and writing forgettable slop for other artists. Woman Like Me for Little Mix, which they didn't want to put out. Better Man for Westlife. What Am I for Why Don't We? Flop Band. 2002 for Anne Marie. If you listen to all his songwriting credits consecutively, you can actually sense the distinct vacant tastelessness throughout your journey. Most graciously, in the year of 2020, when we were being terrorized by diseases far greater than Ed Sheeran, he left us alone. But he returned in 2021 with a sin greater than any he'd done before. So here's the thing. By 2021, the Shape of You playbook was 4 years old. That's like a decade in pop years. Shape of You capitalized on a very specific moment when the genre was expanding a little bit, samples were becoming really popular, groove was super important. But after the pandemic, things changed. Younger audience to whom Ed Sheeran is always trying to capture were veering towards authenticity in their music listening habits. This was the year after Folklore and Evermore, Olivia Rodrigo's Gargantuan Sour era. People were mad, confused, grieving, lonely, and uninspired. They wanted to see that reflected in the art they consumed. So what did Ed Sheeran offer us in this period of time? Bad Habits, with a music video of him dressed up as a vampire, cavorting around the streets of London in a pink suit and Joker makeup. This video makes me understand why he doesn't often star in his own videos. Swagless, no sauce, charisma, not found, face made for the radio. Bad Habits felt like a blast from the past in a really corny, cringy, out of touch with the present moment kind of way. Culturally, we were debating the things we'd left behind in the pre-pandemic times, and this seemed very clearly like an item on that agenda. It is a painfully predictable song following the Shape of You formula. I struggled to put together words to describe it because it is nothingness. Pitchfork described it as a bloodless club anthem, and the writer said that watching the music video through gritted teeth, I optimistically wondered if Sheeran's vampire antics were distorting my experience of the song. But the undead aesthetic could not be more suitable. Bad Habits will suck the life out of you. That's exactly how I feel when I hear this song. Firstly, like I've heard it before, and secondly, like it's taken a space in my brain that I didn't give it permission to have, and I'll never know my life again without it. I can tolerate that once from an artist. I can't abide by 8 variations of Shape of You. It was almost unilaterally panned. Charting-wise, it's difficult to display Ed as falling off because he's one of the most famous artists in the world. He's going to smash regardless of whether it's good or not. It debuted at #1 in the UK and was the best-selling single of 2021. Basically, anything he does will go #1 in the UK, and in the US it peaked #2. Now, if you thought Bad Habits was bad, wait till you meet its gorgeous, ugly stepsister, Shivers, the second single from Equal, our next foray into Sophia the Robot soundtracks. It is the same song as Bad Habits. They are virtually indistinguishable from each other. It replaced Bad Habits at #1 on the UK singles chart and peaked at #4 in the US before falling off. Even the critics couldn't bring themselves to come up with a creative rebuke of this song. It was just written off as formulaic and dead-eyed. The following singles from the record have far less impact. Even a duet with Taylor Swift can't move the needle. You know it's curtains for the Ed Sheeran songwriting career when the repetitive, soppy, sentimental ballads, even featuring Taylor Swift, can't land right. Ed Sheeran's at a point now where no matter what he does, records will sell, people will stream, and even though there are significant declines in the longevity of these hits he keeps foisting upon us from here on out, this video isn't really trying to say that Ed Sheeran's career as a producer of music is over. He's going to keep terrorizing us for years. My argument, in case you hadn't always figured it out, is that his songwriting ability is dead, and he killed it himself. Pitchfork summed up my issues with Equals pretty well in their review. Here's what they said. These are not songs that invite close listening. Besides, when you do start to dig below the surface, Sheeran's gestures of supposed depth become glaringly hollow. Women, the most frequent subject of his music, are continuously described as little more than body parts that Ed Sheeran wants to attach himself to. Sheeran's reliance on cliches is especially unfortunate during the back half of the album, which is where he placed a majority of the songs about death and fatherhood. Visiting Hours, an acoustic tribute to his late music mentor, finds the singer wishing he could drop by heaven for a bit and ask for some advice. It's the one opportunity to approach something dark with a sense of maturity, anger, anything that has shown that he has truly grown up. Instead, he imagines death as a young child would, where heaven is a physical place with visiting hours. I want to hone in on Ed Sheeran songs like Visiting Hours because it's this and its clones like Supermarket Flowers that get lobbed in my face by the unwell people who stan Ed Sheeran songwriting as evidence that he is very capable and I am looking in the wrong place, much like Taylor Swift. That's their favorite gotcha that Taylor also loves the applause and also writes emotional songs, and you just have to look a bit harder for them. Here we must simply revisit the difference between sentiment and specificity. Oscar Wilde described sentimentality as wanting to have the luxury of an emotion without paying for it. Sentimentality is a cheap shot. Taylor Swift rarely, if ever, relies solely on sentimentality to make her emotional dispatches land. She is actually famous for her detail, the red scarf that she left at her ex-boyfriend's house, for example. So the two songs we can compare here have vaguely similar emotional terrain. Soon You'll Get Better from Lover is a song about anticipatory grief, accompanying her mother through cancer treatment and worrying about what the outcome will be. That is our example of specificity. Since we've already torched Visiting Hours, let's take Supermarket Flowers as our example of sentimentality. Let's look at how these two songs approach the subject of grief. Supermarket Flowers reaches for sweeping statements and prepackaged emotions. You were an angel in the shape of my mom. When God takes you back, he'll say, hallelujah, you're home. This is the musical equivalent of a sympathy card. Pretty words arranged to soothe you that don't risk saying anything that might hurt you or feel too raw. It's polite. Even its images like supermarket flowers and day-old tea feel generic, placeholders for grief rather than grief itself. You can tell what the song wants you to feel because it's telling you directly. It's sentimentality at work. This is easy to digest. It's instantly moving on a very surface level to some, but it is extremely shallow the moment that you sit with it. Soon You'll Get Better doesn't tell you what to feel, it shows you. Taylor sings about the buttons of her coat getting tangled in her hair in the doctor's office lighting, the holy orange bottles that she prays to. These aren't universal images, they're hers. They're small, almost mundane, but they pull you into the room with her. And when she admits, I hate to make this all about me, but who am I supposed to talk to? What am I supposed to do if there's no you? That's not a lyric engineered to comfort. It's a lyric that hurts because it's true. There's no godly angel waiting at the end of this song, no neat ribbon to tie up the pain. It's unresolved, it's honest. Specificity costs something. It forces the songwriter to pay for the emotion they're asking you to feel. Sentimentality is cheap, specificity is art. And here's where Ed Sheeran really loses me. The sentimental stuff has been a valid critique of his work since Multiply. It's the most consistent one, actually. Even the meanest reviews of his work can acknowledge something like, bad habits got stuck in my head. His banal musings and observations about life have always been a weak point. And on his last record, the public reflected that too. Notice how he hasn't had a ginormous tearjerker like Thinking Out Loud and Perfect in almost 10 years? That's because you did it already. You keep presenting us with worse versions of songs we're already sick of and hoping that we'll receive them better. For someone who is truly obsessed with numbers and charts and wakes up thinking, how can I take over the music industry today? It's an even more embarrassing fumble to witness his next album, Subtract. If I were to put myself in his shoes, perhaps he thought, okay, I can write a million Shape of Yous. When you have 10 #1 hits, you really have nothing left to prove as a hitmaker. He does, however, have much to prove as a songwriter. Basically, no one takes him seriously in that department at this point. They marketed and presented this record as his most personal and introspective album to date, covering grief, loss, and his legal battles. Again, he's setting you up to feel something, telling you what to feel. He employs Aaron Dessner, who should never have taken this job, because working with Aaron Dessner affords artists some depth and credibility, especially post-folklore and Evermore, which this album came out after. Gracie Abrams tapped Aaron Dessner too for her first record, and her writing often suffers from the same problem of sentimentality, though I will say she's gotten much better at writing between her first and her second album than Ed Sheeran has in a decade, who has just completely lost his grip on reality. Here's the issue. When you take away the bad habits and the shivers, the Shape of You formula, all you have on an Ed Sheeran record are the perfects and the supermarket flowers, aka nothing burgers. By the way, just because a song or a piece of media is covering objectively sad and sympathy-worthy subjects like grief and loss does not automatically mean that this album is good or that these objectively heartbreaking experiences are rendered to heartbreaking effect on a record. The existence of a real emotion does not discount sentimentality. Again, when he's interviewing for this record, he's bragging about how he wrote half of this album in 2.5 hours. We can tell. You keep telling us that it's not that deep and you don't think about it that very much, even when you're trying to tell us that it is that deep. The songs on this record are uninspired, unlikable, and often incoherent. This album didn't sell as well as his previous records, and it produced no hit singles for a reason. It's boring. It's trite. It's an Ed Sheeran album. You know what's kind of crazy is the way that he started copying Taylor Swift at this point. So this is his Returning to My Roots album, and later in the year, he follows the slop of Subtract with the slop of Autumn Variations. He was jacking Taylor's swag in a major way. Firstly, do you see the playbook that he's hoping to borrow? Artist who has been accused of selling out or making bad pop music, Taylor with Lover, returns to their writerly roots, Taylor with Folklore, and blows everyone away with their sincerity and talent. Then, once that happens, follow it up with another album in the same vein, Taylor with Evermore, and reap twice the reward. Ed even said that the songs for Autumn Variations were piling up after Subtract and that he just couldn't stop writing. That's literally what Taylor said about Evermore. And he's doing it all with Aaron Dessner. Autumn Variations, you will never be Evermore. How dare you invoke God to do satanic ritual behaviors? But again, nobody cared. Mixed reviews, no raves. There was no Ed Sheeran is so back party, no album of the year. Ed Sheeran is a deeply unoriginal artist. Even the things that made him interesting in his earlier work were his proximity to a genre that didn't seem hospitable to his talents, grime, hip hop, and R&B. He has never once evolved his craft, only tried to mimic and copy himself and other artists in his orbit, whether by making a collaboration album with them where he tried on their clothes or by stealing their marketing plan and talking points. He takes a year off after this to do God knows what, keep touring, I guess, and then has decided to come back and terrorize us again in 2025. He has learned absolutely nothing from his flops. He ignores the reviews and he keeps delivering the slop. The Evermore bait and switch strategy didn't work. Nobody liked it. So instead of coming up with something else, what does he do? Returns to the same strategy that he has been using since he cursed the world with Shape of You. Let me put out a toothless pop song and follow it up with a corny ballad and bang, Azizam, Old Phone. That's the Ed Sheeran special. The album is called Play because he said he was being too serious and wanted to have fun again. He says there's no big concept, no pressure. I made this because it feels good, not because I need to have another one album or single. How am I supposed to believe that you're not chasing a #1 when I'm staring down the barrel of Azizam and Sapphire, songs which only can be described as dead-eyed ploys for a #1 hit? It is crazy to me that he's still trying to pitch literally anything that he does as new or original or different from what he's done before. There was no big concept to Autumn Variations, so I don't know what the hell he's talking about. Not a single one of his albums has ever really had a unified theme or concept, talking nonsense as per usual. And how's this record doing? Pretty good, I suppose. Neither Azizam nor Sapphire hit the top 2 on the singles chart, and despite saying that he doesn't really care about charting, Azizam particularly had a massive typical Ed Sheeran marketing, radio, and streaming push. And yet, when you do the same thing over and over again and refuse to iterate, people will get bored. There is, quite frankly, much better pop music being made. There's even better background music being made. We have officially run out of uses for the illustrious lack of talent that is Ed Sheeran. Finally, it seems the 2010 sleep paralysis, squirrel in the brain controlling an iPad song-making monster is losing his grip. Please, Ed Sheeran, spare us from these assaults and save whatever dignity you have left by ceasing to make new music. Thank you. Writing this script has drained the life out of me, and I'm still alive, but I'm barely breathing. But I desperately need to listen to some good music evermore to get me out of this. All right, leave me a comment and let me know, when do you think Ed Sheeran's career died? I'll see you in the next one.